How do I find the right keywords for my book? Or how do I even start writing a book in the first place? These questions and more are answered in the new Chapter 1 podcast, Ask Me Anything video series, available on YouTube. In these videos, I'm going to be answering your literary questions about media, marketing, publishing, and technology. So think about anything you've ever wanted to know about writing, publishing, and promoting a book, and then send those questions to info@ch1podcast.com. To access these videos, just click the link in the show notes or search for Chapter 1 Podcast on YouTube. And now on to the show.
Hi, I'm Tracy Lawson, and the name of my book is Revolt, and it's book 4 of the Resistance series. Revolt is about 2 teen freedom fighters who put a plan in motion to overthrow a totalitarian government and oust its wolfish leader. Just when everything seems leveraged in their favor, there's treachery and lies and long-held secrets that could derail the plan.
Book lovers unite! I'm Demethius Jackson, and you're listening to the Chapter 1 Podcast. The greatest stories ever written all begin with Chapter 1. In each episode, our guest authors will share their first chapters with you. I love a good dystopian story. And our guest author today has written one of the best dystopian stories I've read in a long time. Tracy Lawson will be joining us today to talk about the 4th and final book in her Resistance series called Revolt. We have a pretty interesting conversation about politics and dystopian realities and potentially where we are and where things could go. So if you're into dystopian, sci-fi, or a good political drama, this is the episode for you. Our conversation with Tracy Lawson starts right now.
Because this is the 4th book in the series, I'm going to start you off with a little background out of the 3rd book so that you'll know where we're coming from. Careen Catecher is one of the teenagers who has joined the resistance to try and overthrow the Office of Civilian Safety and Defense, which has basically taken over the United States government and wields more power than any of the 3 legitimate branches of government. Careen has been fighting against the OCSD, and they've done some serious damage, but the OCSD has taken her hostage in the 3rd book, and she's just been rescued by her friends in the resistance. Now, she's been held and tortured and basically is suffering from Stockholm Syndrome and PTSD and a whole lot of other stuff. And so when she's taken to the safe house, she's convinced that the other members of the resistance who are supposedly her friends are actually not her friends any longer, because she's been told that so many times. Careen is in the safe house, and she has wandered down the hall to what the guy who runs the safe house refers to as Command Central, which is his video surveillance office. She sees a tab open on one of the screens with her name on it. So she clicks on the cursor. The video is a little dark, but she can see a woman running down a city sidewalk. And there are police officers chasing the woman, and they grab her and throw her up against the wall, fling her down on her knees, zip tie her hands, and somebody steps out of the shadows and fires point blank into the back of the woman's head. Now, what freaks her out so badly is that the woman is her. And this is something that has not occurred, but she's watching it happen right in front of her eyes. And the man who pulled the trigger is her lover. And so this is what she sees going into book 4. And actually, this guy has just saved her. But because of all that she's been through, she's not sure what to believe. So this is from chapter 1 of Revolt, book 4 of the Resistance series. Tommy Bailey's likeness, gun in hand, stood frozen on the huge television screen, staring down at Careen Catecher's crumpled, lifeless body. In reality, it was Careen who held the gun, nostrils flaring as she drew rapid, panicky breaths. Tommy, hands raised in surrender, wanted to kick himself for underestimating the complexity of her emotional state. When he'd rescued her from ongoing torture and abuse at the Office of Civilian Safety and Defense, he'd assumed she'd be glad to see him. Witnessing that convincing video of her own murder had freaked her out. Her eyes flicked to her wrist, where the LED light on the personal identification and GPS tracking device she wore flashed in time with her racing heartbeat. When the OCSD's new security mandate went into effect, everyone under the age of 18 would be fitted with one of those links. If Atari can fool people with the enhanced video, the link won't be reliable or honest. False evidence like this can be created and used against anyone. Tears filled her eyes, and she bit her lower lip to stop it from trembling. The OCSD said the link is to protect children. I believed it was true. It would be such a good thing to know that no bad could ever happen to the defenseless. Tommy, what are we going to do? How can we stop him from ruining the integrity of the link? Well, sabotaging the link was top priority for the resistance. Careen had been one of the rebel group's most passionate and visible members, but now she didn't seem to remember whose side she was on. Tommy pulled an exaggerated look of surprise. We? You just said we. She blinked, confused. What? You just said, what are we going to do? You still think of us as a team, don't you? Come on, admit it. Even if I did say that, which I didn't, do you seriously want to argue semantics? He folded his arms on his chest. No time like the present. Hit me with your best semantics. Don't try to distract me. They've pitted us as adversaries so you can prove your loyalty to the OCSD. She tilted her head toward their doppelgangers on the screen. That's your task, isn't it? Look, I don't have to prove anything to the OCSD. I'm in the resistance, and so are you. You may not trust Atari or his videos, but we can trust each other. My enemy's enemy is my friend, right? Well, how do I know if you're my enemy's enemy? You and Atari are probably besties by now. Hardly. I can't stand the guy. Careen, you're my best friend. She bit her lip again as she glanced up at their images, and he recognized her resolve wavering. As if to prove him wrong, she raised the gun a few inches. If it comes down to you or me, Tommy, I swear to God I'll shoot you. Her words hung in the air for a split second before he lunged at her and grabbed both her wrists in one hand, pointing the gun up and away until she was standing on tiptoe. Come on, Careen, just let go. No, she thrashed and twisted in his grip. He drove her backward and pinned her against the door, which shook and rattled in its frame as she tried to throw him off. He deflected the knee she aimed at his groin and clamped one hand around her throat. The blazing fury in her eyes began to fade, and she gasped for air. He felt her losing strength and slammed her hand against the wall. As soon as the gun clattered to the floor, he released her and picked it up. Careen slid down the door and huddled there, coughing, arms covering her face. Her whole body trembled, and Tommy realized with a pang that she was waiting for him to fire the kill shot. He removed the magazine from the gun with a flick of his thumb and ejected the chambered round. You keep this part, and I'll keep the bullets. Deal? She didn't respond, so he laid the empty gun beside her and pocketed the magazine. I'm sorry if I hurt you. Her hand shook as she picked up the gun. How do you expect me to trust you now? You don't build trust with a loaded gun. Besides, if you kill me, you'll be alone here with Atari. Is that really what you want? She gulped. No. Okay, good. I know this is confusing. The resistance, that's me, Kevin, Pete, and Atari, rescued you from the OCSD. We're at a resistance safe house. The OCSD has no idea where you are. The quadrant marshals aren't coming to get you, and there's absolutely no chance that I'm going to execute you, no matter what you saw in that video. Do you understand? She pressed her lips together and nodded. The link's never going to work anyway. Atari will see to that. He held out a hand, and she let him help her to her feet. He opened the door, and she marched back down the long hallway to his room, where she gathered the comforter and one of the pillows into her arms and disappeared into the bathroom. He heard the lock click. Tommy moved a chair across the room so it blocked the bathroom door and settled himself there to discourage her from more nocturnal roaming. Good night, Careen. She didn't respond. He took a deep breath and forced himself to breathe slowly to calm his jangled nerves. This should have been a night of celebration. The resistance was on a roll, using guerrilla-style tactics to assault the credibility of the OCSD and its director, Madalyn Davies. Atari, the resistance operative who had infiltrated the OCSD, was truly the one in control of the link. Careen was back where she was supposed to be, even if she didn't recognize it yet. Helping her transition from captive back to freedom fighter was going to be harder than he thought. How could she believe he was going to kill her? He'd intended to tell her he was in love with her. He reached into his back pocket and brought out the bracelet with the lock and key charm that had belonged to his mom. He'd given it to Careen the day she'd been accused of Stratford's murder, when he'd vowed to protect her and make everything all right. Now, that promise had proved impossible to keep, and he'd been carrying the bracelet around with him ever since. If he offered it to her now, he was pretty sure she'd throw it back in his face. It was his fault that she'd found his gun. He hadn't hidden it well, just dumped in the bottom desk drawer upon his arrival at the safe house, hoping his mom's favorite saying of out of sight, out of mind would prove true. Shutting the gun away, however, had not banished his memory of how he'd used it to kill someone. Self-defense or not, it was the most horrible moment of his life, and it ran on a constant loop in his brain like one of Atari's videos, except this one was 100% true. After a time, Careen must have thought he'd fallen asleep. He chafed at his helplessness as he listened to her sobbing on the other side of the door.
So let's dive into the story. Cerebral monitoring links, people cams, and the misuse of technology in medicine. There's a lot of scary concepts going on in your story.
I know, right?
Yeah, but it could also be argued that some of these concepts are what we're already living. So is the Resistance series a glimpse into our future?
Oh, golly, I hope not. We write dystopia so it stays fiction, to kind of bring it to the forefront and have people go, oh, golly, I wouldn't want to live in a world where maybe I kind of already do. Now, I want to say up front, I didn't invent anything for this series. All the gadgets, all the drugs, all the everything already exist in the universe. I didn't come up with anything different or new. It would be really easy to do the things that happen in this book if you make people frightened enough. And that was kind of the premise, was that how frightened do you have to make people before they will let you do anything you want to them? Because this is an alternate reality version of 2034. Imagine the United States if terrorist attacks had continued on American soil after 9/11 with enough regularity that the public outcry became protect us, save us at all costs. And the creation of the Office of Civilian Safety and Defense, which was basically patterned after the air raid warden stuff that was going on during World War II after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And everybody in America was convinced that bombings on the mainland were not far behind. They developed a watch system to watch the people, know about the people, know if there's anybody in your neighborhood who's not supposed to be there. And the air raid wardens were kind of, charged with watching people in their neighborhoods. And I found a 1941 air raid warden handbook in an antique store and kind of used that as my guideline for the quasi-military police force in the Resistance series books.
Oh, wow. That was an incredible find.
Yeah. Oh, I know. When I saw that, I was like, yes. And,
and you do make an interesting point where, had those attacks continued, it's very easy to see how the Department of Homeland Security could have evolved into the OCSD.
Oh, exactly. Because if you think about it, if people demand protection at all costs, when you demand protection, you give up privacy. You give up autonomy. Tommy and Careen live in a world where there's no shopping malls, no movie theaters. If you want to watch the Cowboys play on Sunday, you can do that, but you got to do it from home because they play in an empty stadium because it's just too dangerous to allow people to congregate in that way. And similarly, one of the rites of passage for teenagers is getting your driver's license and being able to take a girl out on a date without your dad driving you or whatever, and then, but in this particular case, not only can you not get a driver's license, but like as not, your father does not have one either. Because only high-ranking government officials are allowed to have access to such a large weapon as a car.
Wow.
And everything is treated as though it can hurt you. Like even they've abolished cash because we need to monitor what people are buying. If you're buying fertilizer and things to make bombs, we need to be able to track you. And if you're paying cash for that stuff, we won't know. So therefore, cash is too dangerous. And there's always a logical reason why. But when you add it all up, then you go, oh, wow, let's just chip away at it until there's nothing left.
So I see what you mean when you say that you didn't really make anything up for the story. It's like, okay, what do we have now? And then what happens if we stretch it to its absolute extreme limit?
Yes, just take it to an extreme. That's right. And how frightening it would be if people subscribed to this and said, oh, yeah, that's okay. Because I actually did have a friend who, when I was running an early draft of this by her, and she was writing a book at the same time, and I said, yeah. And so they've outlawed grocery stores, and the food just gets delivered once a week. And she goes, oh, that would be great. But at the same time, I said, but you don't get to pick what you get. And then she went, oh. And then, of course, Tommy's an 18-year-old football player. You can't feed the boy enough. And then my daughter, one night she came home and she complained because her dad was working away from home and I was playing single mommy. And I had always worked in the evenings. And so my husband had done the grocery shopping. Well, my 16-year-old comes in and she goes, Mama, it is like an episode of Chopped in the kitchen. I cannot pack a lunch. Could you please go to the grocery store? There's nothing in there that goes together. And I thought, what if the government was delivering our groceries? It would probably be something like that. So Tommy's like, they couldn't send peanut butter and jelly in the same week. That'd be too easy, right? So his life is like an episode of Chopped where he's always trying to come up with meals and be creative and make stuff out of nothing. Because, it's like, well, I guess it's tuna with Thousand Island dressing because we don't have any mayo. Let's see how that goes. So it was fun to take those things that would just be a minor annoyance if it was just, Mom didn't make it to the grocery this week versus, shoot, this is all I get for a week.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Let's examine your main characters, Tommy and Careen, because their relationship with each other seems kind of complex, almost as complex as the situation they're dealing with. There's, a lot of love and hate and maybe even some manipulation to control one another.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so. Now, see, Tommy is coming from a completely different place than Careen. Tommy had as normal an upbringing in what you and I would consider normal as possible. His parents were affluent. His dad was a law professor at the local university, and his mom had worked for the government. So they were allowed to keep their car. Mm-hmm. They had a lake house that they could drive to in a nearby community where they could, get out of their quadrant every now and again. Unlike the people who didn't have cars at all, they had a little bit of money. He was, a cherished only child. And then on the eve of him going away to college, his parents are killed in a suspicious car accident. Tommy comes to find out in the course of the first book that his dad was an operative for this resistance, and he had no clue. They shielded him from it his entire growing up, and they just made life as normal as they possibly could, all the while knowing that his dad's out there trying to overthrow the government. And he's completely reeling. He's got survivor's guilt and PTSD, and he's trying to recover enough to walk again when he used to be a football star. And so he's like, I'm not a jock anymore, so what am I? So he's having this huge identity crisis. And then just when he's decided he's not going to off himself, he wants to live, then you get this terrorist attack where he's got to start taking the antidote that makes him hallucinate. And it's just like, he can't catch a break at the beginning of this book. And so he's really lonely. And when he sees Careen and he sees somebody that he perceives as just as lonely as him, he reaches out like, quickly. Oh, good. There's someone I recognize. I can maybe make a new friend and maybe she'll see me as whole instead of the broken person that I am. And Careen, on the other hand, has had a really volatile upbringing. Her father was killed in one of these terrorist attacks when she was 9, and she was with him. And they were trapped in a building, and before the rescue workers got to them, her father had died in front of her. And so she was really traumatized by that. And her mom was flighty and, basically wasn't prepared to be the adult. And once she was widowed, then Careen kind of basically had to step up and be the grown-up in the family. She worked hard, got a scholarship to college, waved goodbye, and decided, I'm never seeing my mom again. And she showed up at this prestigious university with like one backpack and one duffel bag. And she's like, I'm just ready to start over here. So the last thing on her mind is a relationship. And she's really just ticked when this terrorist attack happens because it's keeping her from going to class. And she's got her head down and she just wants everybody just leave me the F alone and let me just get on with my life and build some kind of security here. And so when Tommy approaches her, at first she's like, I just really don't want anybody to count. I don't want anybody to worry about. I just want to worry about myself. And it takes a little while and all of his considerable charm to break through her defenses. And it was fun to write them like that.
Yeah, it sounds like it. You definitely have that yin and yang dynamic going on in their relationship.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because he's, like I said, he's an athlete. He's recovering from a huge injury. And as they get deeper into the resistance, he revels in learning how to fight and learning how to shoot and all the physical stuff, the explosives and all this stuff. He's totally down with all of that. And meanwhile, she's reading economics books and talking to the older professors that are part of the resistance and trying to get a handle on how do we solve this thing without it getting violent. So they're really on different trajectories. But then they flip trajectories in one of the books where he's like, if I'm going to keep risking my life, I really should know why. And then she says, oh my gosh, if I had a gun, I would shoot whoever I had to get out of this situation. And so it was fun to take teenagers who are changing rapidly and becoming proactive and becoming skilled at this new thing, and just, let them explore it.
It's interesting you say that, because Tommy and Careen are young people fighting against this massive establishment. Is that not indicative
Yes.
of the recent increase of political awareness and activism by young people now in our country and around the world?
Oh, I think teenagers always feel the need to rebel against the establishment, against the old people who are telling them what to do. And I think the rise in the political activism is definitely relevant in the books. And then also it relates to what's going on in the real world. It got harder and harder to write these books as things got crazier and crazier, out here where you and I live.
Is there a specific person that the resistance is fighting against, such as the OCSD director? Or are they revolting against different facets of the entire system of control?
Well, see, like I said, the three legit branches of government have all kind of been usurped by the OCSD. The OCSD leader in Counteract is Lowell Stratford, and he's a very charismatic guy, younger, like 50s-ish, attractive, very, very kind of confidence inspiring. And he's also a scientist, a medical doctor. And so he's a trusted person, and he's ingratiated himself and worked his way in to the OCSD when it was founded by executive order in 2019 to address the issues of domestic security. All things domestic security eventually fell under the purview of the OCSD, and he just kind of kept growing the OCSD so that it became this power monster, this power suck, where it took everything, OSHA, the CIA, the FBI, all the eyes, ended up under the purview of the OCSD. And again, the same thing happened to the government that was happening to the people. It's like they said, oh my gosh, help us out. Help us deal with this. And then they turned around one day and they went, oh crap, he's in charge of everything. And it was too late. So you have this guy who's like this overlord, and he just dictates how things happen. And, Supreme Court votes his way. Congress doesn't dare oppose him. The president's just a puppet for him. And so instead of me going in and attacking the actual government, I said, what would happen if we let somebody else? Oh, just let me handle that for you. But yeah, I wanted to show what would happen if somebody who seemed like a good guy when it started, just what power and the quest for power would do to him. And he really did truly start off with good intentions. I'm going to protect the people. And then it gets out of his own control. And also Tommy and Careen are not, they're not taking this on all by themselves. They kind of stumble into this as the first book progresses. They stumble across some people from the resistance who explain and kind of educate them, and also bring Tommy up to speed on the fact that his dad was one of the members of the resistance. And then Tommy kind of feels obligated to, to try and carry on his father's legacy.
Well, Tracy, you have created an incredibly massive, tantalizing story. How are you feeling now that this is wrapped up and done?
Oh my gosh, when it was over, it was really hard to wrap the series in the middle of the election, the most recent presidential election. It was really hard to come up with anything that was, more out there than what was going on in the real world. And when I wrapped it and I sent it all to the editor, and she goes, Susan has been with me since the beginning, and, I sent her Revolt, and she goes, so do you like it? I'm like, I don't know. You need to tell me if I like it. Because I was just so blown away with trying to wrap it up. And of course, you leave a door open a crack just in case. There's one bad guy who you don't know where he ended up at the end, and then you also realize that there's not a clear, clean solution to the problem, and that the people who are the resistance members are going to need to continue fighting. They're going to need to continue being watchful because of the things that the OCSD has done to the people. That's going to take a while for them to recover from. But yeah, I now if I want to hang out with Tommy and Careen, I have to go open a book. And so that was why I decided I was going to write a TV pilot and try to adapt Counteract.
Oh, right on.
And the pilot made it to the semifinals at Austin Revolution and the Atlanta Film Festival this year. And so I was pretty encouraged, considering I had no training and I didn't know what I was doing. But the story did adapt itself well to TV because of the multiple perspective, lots of different characters, but the potential to flesh out the backstory on all these people, You can kind of see it being a series that's structured the way a series like Handmaid's Tale or Orange is the New Black is structured.
Okay. What do you want people to gain from reading the series?
Wow. First and foremost, I want them to be entertained. I would love it if they were on the edge of their seat and couldn't wait to hear what happened next. But I also want them to think about what kind of world they want to live in. I want them to question authority and not blindly follow. And I want them to understand things like unintended consequences. Because often, especially with young kids, they look at a problem in the world and they say, oh my gosh, all we have to do to fix X is Y. And I don't know why the government and I don't know why all the grown-ups won't just fix this thing that we need fixed, because all we got to do is this. And it seems like it's the easiest thing in the world if we all just agree that this is what we got to do and we make a change. But they don't always see unintended consequences, and that there's ripples in a pond, and that there's, a lot of factors that figure into any monumental decision. And it's just always a whole lot more difficult than you think it's going to be. And sometimes in pursuing a solution to a problem, you end up creating other problems. And that's why the world is just so darn complicated.
Yeah, I was just talking to a friend the other day about something similar, about how it was so much easier to make decisions when we were younger because we were pretty much oblivious to so many different things.
Yes.
Now, with our adult rationale, we have to think about all of the different aspects and the angles and how this affects that and ripples and
oh, I know. And then some of us.
There's always having to strike a balance between give and take. What are we giving up for this?
Mm-hmm. Oh, exactly. And sometimes it's a good thing to give things up, but sometimes it's not. We hit that several times. There's one instance in the third book where one of the resistance members is having a parlay with the OCSD director. And it's a new OCSD director from the second book on. And
Madalyn?
It's a younger woman, Madalyn Davies, and she kind of ends up in this position just almost by accident. It's like, and you kind of wonder, how in the heck did she end up in charge? Well, it's a long and complicated story, but so she's trying to really buckle down even harder than Lowell Stratford was doing. And this resistance member, he goes, well, how do you feel about bungee jumping? And she's like, oh my God, bungee jumping. And he goes, yeah, well, what if, I decided that bungee jumping was the ultimate way to happiness, prosperity, yada, yada. And I mandated that everyone over 18 had to bungee jump at least once a week. And she goes, wait, what? No. And he goes, okay, think about it. How can I make a decision for everybody? Because I don't know everybody and their wishes and their desires and what's best for them. So how can you make a decision for everybody? And it's just, when you trust somebody to take over your life and make decisions for you, you have to be very careful about who you trust. So, and you definitely, golly, you don't want to trust Madalyn Davies because she just really has no idea what she's doing. And it was fun to write her too and watch her just completely unravel as things got more complicated and the resistance gained strength and purpose.
Well, Tracy, you've written a pretty awesome series. Where can people go to pick up the entire series and learn more about you?
Okay, great. I have a website. It's the Resistance Series fan site, and the address is counteractbook.com. So let me say that again, counteractbook.com. Will take you to all kinds of information about Tommy, Careen, the Resistance series, the supporting characters, and also give you links to get the book on Amazon. And if you want signed copies of the book, there's a way to do that through my website. The books are available in audiobook, ebook, and paperback, and they're available through Barnes & Noble. And I just changed my distribution, so I should be available in more retail outlets as time goes on. But right now, the best place to get it, the fastest place to get it is probably Amazon.
And with that, we're going to wrap up another episode. Thanks again to Tracy Lawson for joining us today. If you have a question for her or for me, or an author who you think would be a good fit for the show, let me know. Connect with me on social media. I'll just leave it at that. Facebook, YouTube, maybe even a little Twitter. Or or send an email to info@ch1podcast.com. Check out ch1podcast.com, where there you can listen to previous episodes and hopefully find your next favorite author. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Overcast, wherever podcasts can be downloaded. Leave us a 5-star review, and don't forget to tell everyone you know about the show, because that is how we grow. And I would be remiss not to mention our Patreon. Become a Patreon supporter by going to Patreon and searching for CH1 Podcast. That's the other way our show grows. I usually have a list of closing remarks, but I don't seem to have that list today, so hopefully I've mentioned everything. So, okay, I guess that's it for me. You all stay awesome. Till next time.